We seem to be heading to war with Iran. Certainly the Biden administration is pushing us in that direction. What's new and interesting and ominous is that very few Republicans, the opposition party, are pushing back. Instead, some of the party's leaders are encouraging it. Here, for example, is Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina from last weekend on NBC.
Welcome to Prophecy Views. Now, that was kind of an ominous introduction from Tucker Carlson. And the reason I'm bringing this to you is just something that I want to have you keep kind of in the back of your mind, or in the forefront of your mind. Because the reason this is important is the next thing to happen, one of the next things that's coming up on the time clock, God's prophetic time clock, is either the peace agreement or the 6th Trumpet War. Now let's take a look at that 6th Trumpet War so we have some details that we can work off of. And I'm coming to you from Revelation 9, verse 13. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Now that's important, and we're going to move on. And the four angels were loosed which were prepared for an hour, a day, a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. We're going to get back to that as well. And pay attention to this as well. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200 million. And I heard the number of them. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth, and of brimstone. And the heads of the horses were as heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire, by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. Now, we're going to take this set of scriptures and we're going to break it down just a little bit. The first thing I want you to notice is there are four angels that are in the great river Euphrates, and they're bound. So these are evil angels. These are some of the third that came down with Satan when he rebelled. So these are bound in the great river Euphrates. So that tells us that this is definitely a war from the reading of the scripture. The spark of this war is going to be along the Euphrates River. The Euphrates River starts in Turkey, goes through Syria, goes through kind of the heart of Iraq, right close to Baghdad, and empties into the Persian Gulf at the border of Iraq and Iran. The last several miles is the border of Iraq and Iran. So the spark of that war is going to be in that area. The culmination of that is there's an army that's going to be involved that has the ability to field an army of 200 million soldiers. They will get involved, and the end result will be the killing of 1/3 of the human race off the face of the earth. So let's take a look to see what Lindsey Graham has to say, because Tucker Carlson in this intro was leading into an introduction of Lindsey Graham, and let's take a listen to see what he has to say.
You said this week that the only way to keep the war from escalating is to hold Iran accountable, part of what you're talking about now, and that it might mean bombing their oil refineries. Yeah. Have you had any discussions with the Biden administration about this?
A bit. Here's my message. If Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran, launches a massive attack on Israel, I will consider that a threat to the state of Israel, existential in nature. I will introduce a resolution in the United States Senate to allow military action by the United States in conjunction with Israel to knock Iran out of the oil business. Iran, if you escalate this war, we're coming for you.
Are you effectively poised to declare war on Iran? That's very strong language.
I am poised to use military force to destroy the source of funding for Hamas and Hezbollah.
Okay, so Lindsey Graham comes in, and he's talking about they're ready to go to war with Iran. And so now the stage is set. Now, in this interview that Tucker Carlson did, he interviewed Colonel Douglas McGregor. This guy, I have seen him before. He's very intelligent. He has a tremendous breakdown and a foresight of how things will go. But he's going to give us also an indication later that you really never truly know the direction that war is going to go. It'll always go in a direction you never thought of. So let's take a look at this, because now he's going to introduce Russia into the conflict if we get into war with Iran. Let's listen to see what Colonel McGregor has to say.
But what's most important, I think, for Americans to understand is if we attack Iran on the basis of Hezbollah's alleged willingness to attack Israel if Israel invades Gaza, we will end up in a fight with Russia. Russia will not sit by quietly and watch Iran destroyed by the United States air and naval power in the region. And once Russia enters this, it becomes much more than just a local conflict, maybe more than just a regional war. We haven't thought this through. We need to do that. And I doubt seriously at that point that the Turks would be able to stay out.
Okay, so now we have Colonel McGregor, and he's talked about Russia, and now he's going to introduce the fact that you never can tell how a war is going to go. It can go off track. Well, if this war is headed where I think it's possibly headed, we will see the introduction of China into this war. I believe that the army that can field an army of 200 million soldiers, a nation that can do that, is probably China. And the thing that I've said many times on this channel is you never see China mentioned in Bible prophecy, really. And China has their nose in everything, so it's really surprising to me that we don't see China mentioned. We know that the culmination, at the end of the culmination of this war, the end result will be a third of the human race will be killed. And no matter what translation you end up looking at on this, one third part of men killed, and that's in verse 18. It's also in verse 15. If you go back and look at other translations, it only gets more ominous. It's just talking simply about one third of the human race. Well, if you wiped out all of China, you're talking about 1.4 billion right there. We've got to get close to 3 billion. So there's a lot of nations that aren't going to be around anymore. Now, I'm not putting this out there in fear. If you know the truth and you know prophecy and you know Scripture and you're saved, we're just watching this stuff unfold exactly how Scripture said it would be. God gave us this thousands of years ago, in some cases 2,000 years ago, in some cases more than that if you go back to Daniel 2,500 years ago. So we're simply watching this stuff unfold, but we want to be looking at this from a perspective of being saved. So I would urge you to read through the book of Acts. Make sure that you're saved. Read in Acts 2:38 what it takes to be saved. Look at what Jesus told Nicodemus. You must be born again of the water and of the Spirit. So let's make sure that we have our house in order first. But it's also good to tell our family members and our friends and neighbors what to expect, because when certain things happen, they'll come to us and they'll say, how did you know this was going to happen? What's going to happen next? And what do I need to do? And that can be an introduction point, simply to bring them in into the fold. So let's take a look now at what General McGregor says, just real quick, about how you never know how war is going to go. And I think this is probably an entrance ramp for China to get involved, because China and Russia have been very tightly aligned since the Russia-Ukraine war. Let's listen real quick to Colonel McGregor.
And let's be frank, historically, wars run out of control. They move in directions you never anticipated. So if you think you can plot this route forward as Lindsey Graham thinks, you're crazy. Once this is unleashed, it's not manageable anymore.
All right, so that kind of brings everything together. If you could just simply take what Colonel McGregor has been saying through this clip and what Tucker Carlson is alluding to and what Senator Lindsey Graham is pushing for, and a lot of the Republicans and definitely the Democrats are pushing for a war right now. They don't seem to really care what direction, who the war is with. They're just simply pointing us towards a war. And I'm not sure why they're doing this, but it's always important for us to keep our head on a swivel. The war that we're looking for is going to spark at the Euphrates River, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran. It will involve at some point a nation that can field an army of 200 million soldiers, which would likely be China. I don't think India would be our culprit since they're not really involved in world politics that much. But we're watching predominantly for China. Now, my good friend and the late Irvin Baxter and I had a conversation back a few years ago, and he always felt that the peace agreement that will start the final 7 years, when this peace agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis is signed, and it'll have to include, you can go back to some of our other previous videos, it'll have to include certain things in it, like the ability for Israel to build their third temple, and they will build it rapidly. Daniel gets into that. We're looking for certain things in this peace agreement, but once that peace agreement is signed, it'll be the greatest prophetic fulfillment in 2,000 years, because then we'll know exactly where we stand. We will have 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon. If the peace agreement were signed first, this war that we're discussing, this 6th trumpet, would have to happen in the first 3.5 years of that, because once you go through Revelation 10, we basically just went through the entirety of 9. You go through 10, and then instantly it goes into the final 3.5 years. So we know from that, prophetically speaking on God's time clock, this has to happen before that final 3.5 years, and that'll happen at the time that the Antichrist reveals himself. He will stand in the temple of God claiming to be God. So once that happens, so this will have to happen before that. What we don't know is what's going to happen first, the peace agreement or the 6th trumpet war. Brother Baxter always thought that the 6th trumpet war would lead us into the peace agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and I always kind of felt that the 6th trumpet war would lead us to would be the on-ramp to the Antichrist. And I understand they're not too far apart, but could it be that the war happens first and we're staring it in the face right now? I don't know. But I know a couple of things. I know the nations that are left, the United States appears to be still intact and protecting Israel, means Israel's still around. Most of the Holy Roman Empire will be intact because the Antichrist will control that Holy Roman Empire for the final 3.5 years, the Great Tribulation. We know that Russia will be pretty much intact because they are going to go with the European Union against Jerusalem at the Battle of Armageddon, the very final battle before God sets up his kingdom on earth. So we can tell from some of the prophecies of the Bible what the earth, the nations that are still on the earth after this 6th trumpet war. So I'm not trying to put fear into you. I believe the United States is still mostly intact. I don't believe that we can expect to come off unscathed, but again, I'm not trying to put fear in anybody. The other thing that I would say is know your salvation. Know that you are indeed saved. I would urge you to add the book of Acts, like I said, to your scripture reading. If you have any questions with what the book of Acts is trying to tell you, or if you would like a personal Bible study from somebody here at Prophecy Views Ministry, reach out to us, and one of our staff members will reach back to you and set up a time for a Bible study. We're happy to do it by Zoom if you're not in the area that we are in. If there's somebody that you'd like us to talk to, again, reach out to us, and we're happy to do that as well. We're always available to you. Just simply reach out to us. You can reach us at prophecyviews.com. But we want to make sure that we understand all of the parameters for this 6th trumpet war. It'll spark at the great river Euphrates, but it will not be contained there. Those nations will still be here at the Battle of Armageddon. It will involve a nation that can field an army of 200 million soldiers. Likely China. I can't say for certain, but I believe it's likely China. 1/3 of the human race will be killed, and I believe if you take China into that equation, you've got about half of it right there, close. So this is something that I just want you to be aware of. There's too much going on. You know, the prophecies of the Bible are mostly centered around the nation of Israel. And so it's very likely that the reason it was talking about this 6th trumpet war was because Israel's involved. And Israel and Iran have been bitter enemies since day one throughout time. So I'm not surprised if the spark is due to a conflict with Israel. We will obviously know more as things unfold. But one more thing that I would stress to you, we don't know who's in this country. This administration currently has got so many illegal aliens pouring into this southern border that we don't have any idea who's coming to this country. Although we do know that Hamas has heavily penetrated our border. So if you're in a larger city, I would ask that you keep your head on a swivel and just be aware of your surroundings. Just guard yourself. You know what that means. What's best for yourself? What's best for you? Make sure that you keep yourself safe. If there's anything that we can do, please reach out. We're going to have more coming out on this in the next few days as the news unfolds and we're able to bring it to you just as quickly as we can. I would urge you to go on to Twitter and take a look at the full context of Tucker Carlson's post today, his tweet, his X today. Take a look at that. It's about 27 minutes long. I would encourage you to watch it. And just think to yourself, when you hear Russia, think China. God bless. We will see you very soon.